Here are the letters from July 27th, 1775. There were 7 documents, but one in particular caught my eye. It is the report that George Washington wrote to John Hancock, in which he says, "One Groves, who came out of Boston the same evening, informed the officer at one of the outposts that the transports had on board 600 men and were bound to Block Island, Fisher's Island, and Long Island to plunder them and bring off what cattle they may find. The fellow returned again into Boston under such suspicious circumstances that it has led me to doubt the truth of his intelligence." After reading this, I decided, let us figure out who this Groves was. And was he a spy? Let's find out. By 1775 July, after the Battle of Bunker Hill, the siege of Boston had basically reached its early stage, in which the British controlled Boston here and much of the harbor via floating batteries and barges with cannons on them, as well as this area, this part to the north, called Charlestown. The town of Charlestown had been burned. This is Bunker Hill, and that's Breed's Hill, and the British had taken both hills from the Patriots in the Battle of Bunker Hill. So by this point, the Patriots controlled a line sort of up this way and a little bit to the north, basically encircling all of Boston and keeping the British in a close area around the main land of Boston. And you can see a little bit wider on this map that Chelsea is here, and then Cambridge is here, and Washington was in Cambridge. And so the Patriots controlled this whole area from Dorchester, Roxbury, Brookline, Cambridge, and then all the way up to this area of where Malden is up north, and then Chelsea a little bit here as well. So the problem for the British was they controlled this area and most of these islands, but there wasn't much food here. And so by late July, they were already struggling to find nourishment and supplies. As a result of this situation in Boston, the British had to go find food. They had to sail out and basically raid the coasts to find food. Now, earlier, in anticipation of this move, Washington asked Captain Dodge to begin sending reports of any movements of ships out from Boston on a daily basis. So Captain Richard Dodge basically was watching Boston and giving hour-by-hour reports of any movements of troops out from Boston that may go either launch an invasion north or south along the coast of Boston, or basically raid farms on the various islands around Boston. Now, you can see that there are a number of islands here and here and here and here. And earlier in July, one of Washington's first moves was to send a raiding party to Long Island here. So they sent out, Washington authorized a band basically from Rhode Island, a group of irregular troops from Rhode Island to sail out, I believe, to Long Island here and burn and raid these various islands, but especially Long Island, and make sure that the British couldn't get supplies from this island. I think they generally wanted to make it very difficult for the British to find any supplies in any of these islands, and so the Patriots enlisted all the farmers around in the countryside to remove cattle, sell their sheep to the Patriots, sell their cows to the Patriots, and otherwise essentially remove hay from the landscape so that animals in Boston couldn't find food, hay to eat and other food, and basically just create a food desert, a desert of a landscape with no supplies around Boston, to make the siege of Boston very difficult for the British as quickly as possible. Now, of course, the British could get resupplies from the sea, so they were relying on ships coming in and out, which is why Washington asked Captain Richard Dodge to give him information. And on July 25th, 1775, Richard Dodge wrote, "Sir, I am informed by Joseph Groves from Boston today that the shipping gone out is bound for Block Island, Fisher's Island, and Long Island in order to kill, spelled with a C, kill and destroy all that comes in their way with 600 men. The man I will send to you as soon as may be. I am your humble servant, Richard Dodge." Later on July 25th, Brigadier General John Thomas also wrote to George Washington about this fleet that was seen leaving Boston, but he was stationed in Roxbury. So he wrote, "Sir, there was information forwarded to headquarters yesterday p.m. of the sailing of 13 ships from Boston. I sent one Captain Davis down the harbor to watch their motion, and he reports on this return that they put to sea and stood their course about east-southeast, which appears as if they were bound to the southward. That course would lead them out by Cape Cod and to the chops of the South Channel. I am, sir, with great respect, your most obedient, humble servant." So John Thomas, Brigadier General John Thomas, he was stationed in Roxbury, which you can see, this is Boston. You can see Roxbury's to the south of Boston. And this is also probably where this character, who we read about in Richard Thomas's letter, Joseph Groves, came out of Boston today. Okay, so if we go back to the map, probably what happened is Joseph Groves, let's scroll over here. Joseph Groves came out of Boston, across Boston Neck, and across the lines, the enemy lines, which were, you can see, are this line here. This is the English line, I believe, and then into Roxbury, and met with the Patriots in Roxbury to give his information. So Joseph Groves just came out from Boston, and then, which we'll see in a moment, basically we'll see what happens to Richard Dodge, or to Joseph Groves. Joseph Groves comes out, gives his information to Captain Richard Dodge, who writes to George Washington, and then later, in a sort of confirmatory note, General John Thomas also writes to George Washington that the ships seen by Joseph Groves have exited the Boston harbor and have gone out to sea. And so that means they've sailed up this way and then past all these islands and out to sea. And you can see in this letter that Joseph Groves said the ships were apparently bound for Block Island, Fisher's Island, and Long Island. Now, that raises the question: where are Block Island, Long Island, and Fisher's Island? Well, I'm not exactly sure about Block Island, but Long Island is just here, just in the harbor. So the fact that the ships, according to Brigadier General John Thomas, they kept going out to sea. They didn't stop at Long Island. Already puts some doubt on the information that this Joseph Groves gave, because Joseph Groves got these islands wrong, Block Island and at least Long Island. Definitely the ships didn't stop there. So then, is it true that they had 600 men? Well, let's see. Next, we have a letter. The following day, George Washington wrote to Nicholas Cook. Now, who was Nicholas Cook? Nicholas Cook was the governor of Rhode Island. He during the Revolutionary War, and he was a supporter of the revolution. So, basically, it was important to let the governor of Rhode Island know that this group of ships was heading out of Boston and probably around Cape Cod and over to the in the direction of Rhode Island. So that's why George Washington was writing to Nicholas Cook. Nicholas Cook was the governor of Rhode Island, and George Washington wanted to let him know about these ships. So George Washington writes, from Cambridge, July 26, 1775, Sir, yesterday I had an account that 3 men of war and 9 transports had sailed out of Boston, and in the evening I received a note. That's the one from Brigadier General John Thomas. The copy whereof is enclosed. The great distress they are in at Boston for fresh provisions makes it extremely probable that they may make some depredations along the coasts. I have therefore thought it proper to give you the earliest notice, and that the owners of those islands and the inhabitants along the coasts may take the necessary precautions for the security of their property. At the same time, and this is the interesting bit here, at the same time, I must add that the conduct of this Groves in getting into Boston again immediately renders his intelligence very suspicious as to their destination. But their sailing may be depended on. You will please to make use of this intelligence under all its circumstances, as you shall judge most conductive to the public good, and believe me to be with great truth and regard, your most obedient, very humble servant, George Washington. Okay, so you can see that the thing is about this guy, Joseph Groves, he apparently, as soon as he exited Boston from the Neck, he just kind of scooched out of Boston and then through the enemy line and to Roxbury to give his information to this Captain Richard Dodge. He then apparently just scurried right back into Boston almost immediately with no pushback from the British, or apparently very easily got through into Boston again. And that is suspicious because that raises the possibility that whoever this Joseph Dodge guy was, he was an agent of the English military, and that he was basically there to spread misinformation about this group of ships that left the Boston harbor, which, combined with the fact that he thought they were going to go to Long Island and they didn't, already sort of puts some extra doubt on this guy's word. But later, because Brigadier General John Thomas later in the evening was able to give the direction of their course, there is this one island. This supports something that Joseph Dodge said about the ships perhaps heading to Fisher's Island. And now Fisher's Island is all the way down here in Connecticut. You can see this tiny little island. This is Rhode Island up here. This is, Providence, Rhode Island is here. This is all Rhode Island. And then this is the beginning of Connecticut, and there's New London, which at the time was it still is an important city, but it was a well-known city. And off the coast of Connecticut is this island, Fisher's Island. So it was important for Washington to let Nicholas Cook know that this bunch of ships was going to come around Cape Cod towards Fisher's Island, potentially, and past Providence. And so that potentially, they could defend, the Rhode Islanders and Connecticut militias could defend their coastlines against any raiding party from these ships. And to confirm all of this, later in August, the Norwich Committee of Correspondence, which is located in Connecticut, basically confirmed that, in fact, that group of ships, they landed yesterday morning. This town was alarmed with an account of 8 ships, 1 snow, 2 or 3 brigs, and some other vessels appearing of New London Harbor, 3 of which were men of war. A large number of men were soon collected under arms and repaired to our landing, North New London, Groton, and Sea, when the ships were some time in the afternoon. Most of them came to of the west end of Fisher's Island, but so as to cut off communication between these and the main, Duncan Stewart, Esquire, collector for the port of New London, by permission of the committee of that town, went over in a boat to gain intelligence last evening, but was prevented returning until this afternoon, when he was brought back, and he, with the boatmen who carried him over, informed they had taken of that island about 2,000 sheep and 150 head of cattle, indeed all the cattle, sheep, and hogs upon that island, except a number of milk cows, that they had also taken a sloop outward bound from New Haven, with 36 head of oxen, all of which will probably be immediately forwarded to Boston. We can only say we wish some method might be devised to intercept them in Boston Bay before their arrival. So it all turns out that actually Joseph Groves, he was mostly right, partially right. He got the islands wrong, Block Island, Long Island. The British didn't really stop there, but he got Fisher's Island correct. Fisher's Island, where, according to the Norwich Committee, the British took basically all the cattle off that island except a couple of milk cows. So this letter from George Washington to Nicholas Cook, where it expressed some doubt about this character Joseph Groves, that doubt was more or less unfounded. I mean, it was a little suspicious, and it's good of George Washington to be suspicious that this guy could just go right back into Boston. But overall, turns out he wasn't a spy. He wasn't spreading misinformation. He was actually just very helpful. So now we are ready to read George Washington to John Hancock, 27th of July, 1775, in which he says, "Sir, nothing material has occurred in either camp since I had the honor of addressing you on the 21st instant by express. But on Tuesday, 3 men of war and 9 transports sailed out of Boston Harbor and stood a course about east-southeast. One Groves, who came out of Boston the same evening, informed the officer at one of the outposts that the transports had on board 600 men and were bound to Block Island, Fisher's Island, and Long Island, to plunder them and bring off what cattle they may find. The fellow returned again into Boston under such suspicious circumstances that it has led me to doubt the truth of his intelligence. A deserter who came in afterwards informs me that it was given out in their camp that they were either gone for Indians or fresh provisions, and that each transport had but 20 men on board. Upon this intelligence, I immediately wrote to Governor Cook of Rhode Island and to General Worcester that they might take proper precautions for removing the cattle of those islands and the coasts, and to prevent any surprise, as we are confirmed by every account in the scarcity of fresh provisions in the enemy's camp, and particularly by this deserter who says they have had none since the Battle of Lexington. It is very probable this voyage may be only intended for a supply. But as it may possibly be otherwise, I thought it best to transmit the intelligence to the Honorable Congress, that they may forward it to the southward, or take such other step as they may judge proper. Since writing the above, 3 more deserters have come out, presumably out of Boston, which makes 4 in 24 hours. Their accounts correspond with those of the first who came out, and which I have related above. I have the honor to be, sir, your most obedient and humble servant, George Washington. Now, the fact that several other deserters came out, and that we already read from in the future the Norwich Committee about a week later, or 10 days later, confirms what Joseph Groves told Captain Richard Dodge. We know that basically George Washington had no need to be so suspicious of this fellow, but there it is. He was suspicious, and poor Joseph Groves. We can clear his name now. He was a good man supporting the Patriots against the English. If you liked this reading of this letter and the several others we pieced together today to tell the story of this potential spy who actually turned out to be a very reliable source for the Patriots within Boston, Joseph Groves. If you liked this piecing together of that story, please leave a like and a subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.